Welcome to the best of 2025 episode of Beyond Coaching. This will be our last episode of the year. In this episode, we bring together clips from our 3 most listened to conversations this year. Each one focuses on different parts of leadership that coaches deal with every day. You'll hear from Brent Hobson, the Friends University women's soccer coach, to talk about building value for athletes who aren't in the lineup. Jen McNeal explains how failure is used on purpose at the Naval Academy to teach leadership. And Mitch Hull from the 3D Institute breaks down stress, pressure, and why trying to remove them usually misses the point. These clips come from different settings, but the issues are the same: how we lead people, how we handle pressure, and how we build championship environments that last. Thank you for your support this year, and here are the best moments from 2025. Brent Hobson is the long-tenured, highly successful head coach of Friends University women's soccer. He has built a program grounded in accountability, relationships, and respect for every player on the roster. Not everyone plays, but everyone matters and everyone impacts the culture. In this first segment, Brent explains how he shows value to athletes who may never step on the field, and why the only award in his office has nothing to do with wins or goals. This is how he approaches building and sustaining his program.
I think you try to show value with anybody that's in your program as much as you can. I think, something that we do is, we have a leadership committee, and that leadership committee is never our best players. It's people that hopefully can give good input within the program, throughout the year. So I think as a coach, you try to value everybody as much as you can and change up the way you promote your team. Not always your star player, not always the person that's scoring the goals, but try to show value to everybody throughout the roster as much as you can.
Put you on the spot. Something that drives me nuts when I listen to podcasts is people don't give specifics. So give some examples you've done of building value for that kid that may not be the star. I hear you say the leadership committee, and it's not always just the best players. Anything else come to mind?
Yeah, so I have a kid that played for me, probably 5 or 6 years ago. Rebecca Garland, 4-year kid, incredible student athlete, incredible teammate. Did not play a lot. But she's impacted my coaching career for the better. And I actually created an award in her name. It's called the Garland Award. So we give that every year. And it is to a player that we think is committed to the team, that has good work ethic, and is just a good teammate, team first. So team first mentality. Where you're just giving your best every day to the team. And that Garland Award has been pretty special, and I think there's a lot of value in getting that award each year. It's a plaque. It's a huge plaque on my wall, actually. I spent more money on that than anything else. And, we don't have our first team all-conference players on the wall or anything like that. The only award I have is that. So it's the Garland Award, named after Rebecca Garland. Incredible kid. Still talk to her.
Cool. I didn't know that whole story.
Yeah. No, it's a plaque behind my
I've seen it
behind my office, and I think we're in our 4th or 5th year giving that out. And it's something I talk about to my team at the beginning of the year, because it's you could win this and you don't have to play a minute, but can you work hard? Can you have a team first mentality? And just, be a good student athlete throughout the year.
Yeah. I feel like a hard part in my role as athletic director is watching kids struggle through not playing or getting the role they want. And there's a lot that goes into, we could probably have a day-long podcast about all the emotions involved in something like that. But I also think the most valuable experience I see kids have is like the Rebecca experience, where probably didn't get the role she wanted, and had to learn to be a good teammate and adjust her perspective on the sport. And like, that's the kid I want to hire, somebody that can do that. But it's so hard. It makes me just really sad when kids bail when they don't get and just quit when they don't get the role they want. Cause I think there's more value in having to learn to deal with the role you didn't want. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think in any level of college athletics, for the most part, you're recruiting kids that are the best players on their high school team, that are the best players on their, club teams. And, the way of college athletics, I mean, unfortunately, everybody can't play. Everybody can't be the star player. Um, but we need depth. So we need a roster that can compete. Um, so I think for those kids that do understand it and might, take a step back and see the big picture of, okay, I'm not at that level yet. It's hard. It's hard to find those kids that have the maturity, I guess, to understand it and to um, kind of value it in a way. Um, but, I think people always say coach has favorites. Coach has favorites. That's why they play. I mean, some of my favorite kids are those kids that, do put the team first more often than not and kind of understand, their self-worth within the team.
Mhm.
Even though they're not getting all the awards or the playing time but yeah, those kids to actually have the maturity to understand it, it's definitely hard to find.
Yeah. And it takes some serious leadership from the coach to help guide them through that. Let's look at the dark side of that. Every coach I've ever worked with has been through it. I went through it. But the kid that doesn't get the role they want and goes on attack mode, comes at the coach, comes at their teammates, whatever it may be. I think there's a tendency, and I was like this as a coach, where you just want to be done with that kid and get rid of them. Um, because often, while their perspective is pretty real to them, is they've heard things that often aren't there. On Beyond Coaching, we often discuss the claims that today's athletes are different and that they're soft. In this segment, Coach Hobson explains what has actually changed and what he thinks hasn't changed when it comes to coaching today's athletes. He focuses on what coaches still control and where responsibility really sits without hiding behind the generational label. You're a little closer to this generation of athlete than I am, but I'll state an opinion and get your response. But we often hear that this generation has changed. Um, Saying Generation Z, so born around 2000 and on. And I overall agree, I think, but I think it's also overstated and used as an excuse by people to not change and adapt. So curious, how do you think this generation has changed?
Has changed, I think probably a little bit um, individualized in a way. I don't know if selfish is the right word, but I think probably more self-aware of how they are doing individually. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Um, social media I think is definitely a big factor in that. Um, everybody's got the different social media platforms they used and they want to share, their success or they want to post a picture of their trophy and playing time or player award. And so I think social media definitely has an effect of, I think, a little bit more individualized than before. Um, but I think these kids have a lot of pressure, you know, pressure to show everybody that they've done well, pressure to go back to their family or parents. I had success today because I scored the goal, or we won the game because I played 90 minutes, or whatever it is. I think there's a lot of pressure for kids to feel like they have to show everybody that they've done well.
Mhm.
Um,
Good feeling almost they're always being watched by everybody and everybody knows every success and failure.
Absolutely. I mean, on social media, you could post in 2 seconds and get to how many people, you know? Um, so if social media is something that they're really relying on throughout their life and, their daily life, then it's kind of a lot of pressure, especially if your peers are having success and you're not.
Jim McNeal is a U.S. Naval Academy graduate, retired naval officer, longtime football coach, and leadership mentor at the Naval Academy, where he teaches ethics and leadership. He's also the author of the new book, The Crucibles. In this first segment, we discuss how the Naval Academy functions as a leadership laboratory. Jim explains why everyone at the Academy is judged as a leader, not just by results, and on how they lead people day to day. This conversation applies far beyond the military.
I've got a really good example of it being a leadership laboratory, especially as it applies to sports. And I hadn't really thought of this, but one of the young ladies I was mentoring, she was a volleyball manager, and we were talking, and with the kids that I mentor, it isn't, every single kid has different things they want to talk about. Some it's school, some it the physical stuff, some it's their sports, some it's relationships, some say, what are we going leadership. I mean, they need someone to talk to. And, I guess I'm a kind of a sympathetic ear, but so she had some frustrations with what was going on her team. And she had just a really incredible statement. She said, what these coaches around here don't get is that when we look at them as leaders. We look at everybody that we interact with at the Naval Academy as a leader, and we're judging them not about X's and O's or how good they can teach us calculus. How are they leading
Hmm.
us? Because that's what we're supposed to be doing when we get out there. And she's out in the fleet now on a ship and, excuse me, doing great. But I thought, you know what? That is so true. And that's why this is a leadership laboratory. So it doesn't matter the other things that people are doing or the success they have in their particular area. Are you demonstrating good leadership for these midshipmen? And now the fortunate thing, and this is just leadership, general leadership 101, you don't have to learn from a good leader. You learn just as much and sometimes more from a bad leader.
Absolutely.
So not only are you learning from the good leaders around here, you're learning from the bad leaders. So and what I tell the midshipmen is no one is going to hand this to them. No one's, they get a diploma, but they don't get a leadership style handed to them also. So their 4 years, it needs to be focused on, hey, when I get out there and stand in front of my troops, am I the best possible leader that I can be? That is got to.
In this second segment with Jim, we talk about high achievers and how they often struggle the most with failure because they've rarely experienced it. Jim explains why the Naval Academy is intentionally designed to make students fail and how learning to fail safely and quickly is essential for real leadership. Handling the failure piece. Because in your book, you talk about the experience and the whole first year is designed for them to fail, it seems like. So, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and you're right. It's an interesting paradigm because you say, hey, we're going to take very, very high achieving high school students, the best of the best, and put them in a situation where we're going to cause them to fail. And and I think probably the most common thing now, luckily for me, this wasn't me. I wasn't, didn't have a 4.0 in high school and wasn't top of my class and barely made the top 10%. But there's a lot of people that, hey, I was the team captain of this, and I was president of this, and I was salutatorian of this. And then I get here, well, so is everyone else. And then I get something thrown at me and I'm not able to handle it very well and I do fail. So how do I rally past that? And the way that first of all, you have to give the kids permission to fail. Okay, you have to that's if someone goes through this entire experience, this crucible, free plug for the book, this entire crucible of the Naval Academy and doesn't fail, then they haven't done it correctly because this is designed for you to fail. And failing here is not going to get someone killed. Failing here is not going to get a piece of equipment damaged. Failing here is not going to lose a battle that may affect something, for our national security. Failing here is a way to learn how to fail. Why did I fail? How do I get better so I don't fail when it really matters? Right? Hey, if you, and if you bust on a coverage in practice, I want you to bust. If you don't understand the coverage, let's figure it out in practice. I don't want that to happen in the championship game.
Mhm.
And that's exactly, so it's okay to fail during practice. I just want you to fail in the game. And that's really what this is. This is practice. We want to make sure they're ready to go for the game. So, but it's a really tough thing for high achievers to really kind of internalize that that's okay. In fact, we had uh, an officer that coached with us several years ago, a sprint, who had never failed. He was just an incredible, you know, guy with respect to, academics and physical stuff and just, but then got into coaching and was not successful and just didn't know how to handle it. And I've kind of felt bad for him because either the Naval Academy just didn't challenge you enough or you didn't challenge yourself enough to get into a situation where you learned how to fail because he didn't have a great experience coaching because he never learned how to fail. Hey, when you fail, what does that mean? Well, you got to get internal, self-assess, right? Self-reflect. I need to take responsibility for it, right? Hey, how come we got shut out in a championship game? Oh, kids didn't execute. That's your job. Your job as a coach is to have the kids execute. That is the job. So that could have been a great life lesson for him, but it wasn't. And so I want to make sure that the kids that I mentor don't get to be in that scenario. I want them to understand, hey, it's okay. But again, it starts with it's okay to fail.
Mhm.
You're supposed to fail. Well, Silicon Valley, fail. But what do they say in Silicon Valley? Fail quickly,
Mhm.
right? Fail fast. Fail fast. It's okay to fail, but fail fast and move on.
Yeah. What
And that needs to happen here.
go a level deeper for me on that because I totally agree with what you're saying. I mean, I was that high achieving kid that didn't really fail till college, and my initial instinct was to blame an external factor, or it wasn't my fault. It's this, that, or whatever. How do you help kids walk through that piece and look inward as opposed to blaming an external factor?
Okay, great. So let me maybe answer it this way. I'm in a mentoring group, adult mentoring group called the Severn Leadership Group, and I'm paired up with different people that want mentoring and leadership, and it's been a really great experience for me. That's one thing about mentoring. So I really plug for mentoring. You know, oh, I don't have time for that, and I'm too busy for this, and I very selfishly mentor because I get more out of it typically than the mentee does. So that's why I do it. I mean, part of it, because I get better.
Yeah.
When I'm around meeting all these midshipmen, these kids who are 1,000 times better than I was when I were their age, they make me better,
Mhm.
right? But so we with this mentoring group, we do some one-on-one mentoring, then we have some group sessions. And I was asked, I don't know, a year or so ago, "Hey, we're gonna have a group session, and I want you to do a small group, and I want and can you talk about a time you failed?" And I said, "Sure." And I thought about it, and I wanna make sure that I message this correctly. So when I sat down with the group, I said, "From an external standpoint, I've never failed." And they were kinda like, "Ugh." I said, "If you look at my life, I've been fairly successful in almost, every area of my life. And so most people wouldn't say, 'Hey, I don't say I failed based on external measures of me. Where I have failed is by my own internal standard.'" And it really brought home to me, so a kid that I mentored with this mentorship group went on a deployment, left the academy, went on a deployment for about 8 months on an aircraft carrier. He came back. He missed our entire season. We won the championship game that year, 2022. Went 8-0, beat Army twice. Great season. And we sat down for breakfast after he came back, and he said, "Man, you had a great season." I said, we were bad defensively. It's one of the worst defensive teams I've ever had." And he said, "How can that be? You went 8-0. You beat Army twice." I said, "Because we were based on my internal standard, we failed. that season. I failed in so many areas. I did a terrible coaching job that year. Of the kids that I had, I did a terrible job of coaching. We were incredibly lucky to win both of those games, both those games against Army. And that's where it kind of hit me in talking to him. If you constantly looking at external things as far as failure or success, your kind of whims, you're kind of blowing in the wind a little bit, as opposed to what's my North Star?
Mhm.
What's my measure of success? So if I want to do this, I don't care if people say I've success or failed. What do I think? So that's how I look at it. And I talk to the kids. John Wooden's definition of success is being basically the best person that you could be, you're capable of being, right? And if we get, and the academy does a great job of judging these kids and racking and stacking them. And this person's in order of merit ahead of this person. This person gets to pick this instead of this person. But it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with, are you being the very, very best version of yourself that you can be? And you can't be that unless you fail.
Mhm.
Because when you fail, you get better. It's like a weld, right? If something fails and you weld it, it's stronger than it was originally.
Yeah. We use a saying around here at Friends. Mitch Hull from the 3D Institute has been a guest on the podcast multiple times. He has spent his life in sport as an athlete, coach, administrator, and parent across youth, high school, college, and even international levels. He competed at the highest levels of wrestling and led and coached national programs within USA Wrestling. He currently serves as the National Director of Professional Development at the 3D Institute. In this first segment, we talk about trying to eliminate stress in athletics, but how research suggests that approach can backfire. In this segment, Hull explains why stress itself isn't the problem, why perception matters more than pressure, and how reframing stress can actually improve performance.
TED Talk that Kelly McGonigal did on stress. And I always like watching those to get them to relate to sport. Because all of these, they all, if you look at them, there's value to all of it, especially when we tie this stress and what Kelly talked about. And then we go over to Carol Dweck's work on mindset, between a growth and fixed mindset. And so it came about really as I was getting ready to do a keynote with USA Artistic Swimming, because they just come off an Olympic silver medal. They do use our training for their coaches. And they also told me I had an opportunity to talk with they're basically seniors in high school, the top girls in this country, athletically and academically, because most of those end up at Ohio State, Stanford, places like that have synchronized swimming, or actually it's artistic swimming programs now. And after I listened to Kelly's talk, I go, this is a good place to see what might happen, because under self-reporting, the individuals that state they feel they're under the highest stress are basically this 16 to 24-year-old age group. Now, we all recognize that when we look back, when we're in our 40s and we look back at 16 to 24, for most of us, it really wasn't that stressful. But it doesn't matter, because it's what you perceive that's happening at the time, and that doesn't lessen it in any manner. So when I was there, I asked the question that Kelly did with that research was done by, where they asked 8,000 people this question: in the past year, have you been under a little amount of stress, a moderate, or a lot of stress? Recognize there's no right or wrong answer. It's just the answer that you come up with. And what they did after that was asked another question: do you see stress as bad for you? Then over a period of time, they looked at the death rolls, because they did 30,000 people to see who died. And what came across was you had a 43% higher mortality rate if you saw you were under a lot of stress. And I don't care who you are, you understand that is statistically significant. But the key was those that were under a lot of stress, and also said that they did not see stress as bad for them, had the lowest mortality rate of all the groups. And basically what she came out of that was, and even in her own study was, I may be doing this wrong because we keep telling people stress is bad for you. It causes heart attacks. To the common cold, all of these things can be brought on by stress. And instead of teaching people stress is bad for you, help them to understand it's only bad if you see it as bad for you. So it's not the stress, it's the perception. And then she goes, they figured over that time 182,000 people a year died not from stress, but stressing about stress, which made it the 15th largest killer in our country. So I'm going, all right, so how does this apply to athletics? Which to me, it was simple because of how she explained the other parts of it. And so when I asked those girls, the high school girls, I had 45 high school seniors there, and I asked them this question. In the past year, have you been under a little stress, a moderate amount of stress, a lot of stress? 85% of them raised their hand for a lot of stress. And sometimes as we understand it, we also get it. These are high performers. Everything is about performance, academically, athletically, and when it's about the outcome, that's where stress can get to you. So then the question is, what do we do about it? How do we help people address stress?
Stress isn't going to go away in competitive environments. In this segment, Mitch explains why the answer isn't ignoring winning, but shifting the focus to habits, preparation, and daily execution instead of living and dying by the scoreboard.
On the stress, it seems like the goal of a coach is to understand it, create understanding among the team, reframe it, and really lean into it. The other piece you talked about was not focusing on winning and just sticking to the process. What advice do you have to those? I totally agree. Yeah, I think it's very hard for coaches themselves to stick for the process and even harder to teach kids to do that. So what practical tips or advice do you have on how to stick with the process?
One of the things I talked to the UW Whitewater football coach, Kevin Bullis. He's retired from that. But they've won the national championships. They've been in the championship game. They actually set a record. UW Whitewater and Mount Union played in 6 straight national championship games, Division III. He says at the beginning of the year, he talks about it, brings the team together and tells them, our goal is to win the national championship. Now, that's the last time you're going to hear from me all year. They don't focus on that. It's about the journey. It's about the skills. It's about the process. And this is where Carol Dweck's work comes in. You can lower stress or lower even how people see stress just by having a growth mindset over a fixed mindset. Instead of focusing on the destination, that's what fixed mindset people do. I'm going to be the state champion. I'm going to be the national champion. That's all they talk about. That doesn't mean they won't get there, but that's added pressure because all they care about is the end. What I want people to focus on is, and there's a great interview of Giannis Antetokounmpo when he was in the lead for the scoring title, and the interviewer asked him, does he think about it? And then before she was finished, he goes, never. I don't. That's for other people. All I focus on is, how can I shoot free throws better? How can I get more rebounds? How can I be a better teammate? How can I be? He went off 9 things that were growth mindset thought, not a fixed mindset. He didn't care. I just want to be a better player. You know what? If Giannis Antetokounmpo becomes a better player, he's likely to win the scoring title. But he doesn't care about the result. So what we want to do is help kids focus on, I'll take my sport and just say that I can wrestling. All right, we're going to the match. I'm not focused on what the score is. Right, the first period, you know how to do a double leg takedown. You know how to do it. So focus on staying in position. When they reach, take the tie off and go into the tacks that we've worked on. Just work on the performance aspect, not the result aspect. Keep kids focused on the journey, and then the destination is much more likely to happen.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Beyond Coaching. Beyond Coaching is a podcast developed and produced by the Impactful Coaching Project with the support of Friends University. The Impactful Coaching Project seeks to develop coaches that coach the whole person and is the thought leader in coaching the 21st century athlete. The Impactful Coaching Project produces training, information, and research to help coaches improve. To see more information, go to impactfulcoachingproject.substack.com. Thank you.